I was actually going to say we haven't actually mentioned AI in the last 20 minutes, but quite refreshing to hear that your summary and what you see in the market is more around what are customers doing day to day, what are their agents doing, what platform do they need. None of these are kind of feature led, they're all kind of results led. Rather than going in with AI features and hitting everyone leading with AI, it's how do we do what you're doing today but slightly better? How do we take it, like you said, to that next level up without having to blast them with AI features constantly, I suppose.
Welcome to Always On CXCX, the show for contact center and IT leaders. Between helping support your contact center reps, your customers, and the tech that makes the contact center function, you're relied upon quite a lot. You can't afford for your customer experience, employee experience, or stability of the contact center to falter. If you're ready to find the next strategy to keep your customer and employee experience always on, let's get into this episode.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of Always On CXEX. I'm Jon Zoltie, and today I'm joined by Sam Hasson from Tinkle. So Sam and his company Tinkle weren't looking for a contact center practice. His customers dragged him into it. Now it's the fastest growing part of his business, and today he's going to help me break down when Microsoft Teams actually works as a contact center, how to spot the right fit, and what to do if you're starting to question your current setup. So firstly, Sam, welcome. More than happy to bring you on. Do you want to tell the guys a little bit about yourself?
Cheers, John. Really looking forward to the podcast. So yeah, I'm Sam, co-founder and CEO of a AI communications service provider called Tinkle. And been engaged with John and the team for a number of years in helping scale out our contact center operation. So looking forward to talking through all things Teams and contact center.
Great. Thank you very much. So I think to kick it off, I think it's fair to say that you and your company Tinkle, you didn't start out in the contact center space. So What were you selling? What did your customers start asking for, and what did you do about it?
Yeah, so we started off with our own proprietary CX platform, super modern cloud communication platform. And we saw in the market, obviously during lockdown, COVID, a huge shift into obviously the Teams environment and businesses wanting to jump on the single collaboration. And I think a lot of businesses will testify that it was just super simple for everyone to work from home. So we jumped on that bandwagon and we went into the market to support businesses who want to leverage their investment and their presence around the Microsoft ecosystem and stack of Teams. As you know, like 20 million subscribers are added each year to that platform. So it's certainly a market that Tinkle wanted to be able to accommodate and grow.
Cool. And you probably started to see that same pattern across customers in terms of wanting to take on that Microsoft ecosystem. As a quick example, could you walk us through a customer where that was the right move in terms of what did their situation look like? What were they running before? What did you move them to?
Sure. So, I mean, first instance was obviously a necessity to get into the platform of managed diary routing with AudioCodes, and, more importantly, just offering that service out. The second portion was actually where we landed around that sweet spot for the customer requirements of, Teams and where it sits, as well as where it sits within a contact center environment, and getting into contact center. And really what we did with our pillars here at Tinkle is that we understand that CX has its marketplace. It is a Gamma Horizon replacement. It's that SME, maybe top end mid-market platform where businesses want to consume presence still through Microsoft, but want to have a super simple, cost-effective, bundled software platform for CX. Where we've seen the absolute sweet spot in the market for managed voice contact center through Teams is that mid-market, 250 users to 2,500, 3,000 users. They have an enterprise requirement for security, a disparate estate of people wanting to work in a hybrid fashion, and or have a skill set around Microsoft. And a great example of some of the customers which we work with within that space is predominantly, within professional services or customer. One of the most recent wins is a large legal practice across the UK, 1,400 employees of that disparate, number of different phone systems through scale, but they have the skill set internally for Microsoft. They have the investment within the Microsoft ecosystem for E5, and they're looking at leveraging that single presence, but also having a solution that could displace a lot of legacy telephony providers, consolidation, but also their team are all trained up in Microsoft, right? And the CIO is sat there saying, look, we want to leverage our investment within Microsoft, single presence, security. My team know that platform, but the market are telling me that we don't have a solution that could do contact center or can do advanced features or more than the 18 features that we know are available within O365's Teams phone system, right? So the real sweet spot for us is that leveraging that type of customer profile, consolidation, simplification, single global presence. But then the missing part of the jigsaw is, how do we put Teams, how can we make it better? How can we make it comparable to, the 8x8s, the Vonages, and the things which are, gold standard around that sort of mid-market enterprise phone systems for features. And the reality is there is a solution, and there is options around that ecosystem and the contact center services where we're able to suffice, where they may have 1,400 people, but the lifeblood of that business might still be 100 users who are engaging with customers from an inbound and outbound perspective. They still have salespeople who need to be reported on. And obviously the contact center within Microsoft Teams is a really nice fit. Single sort of architecture from the infrastructure guys within the business. They know it, but more importantly, the features and capability of a contact center are able to be delivered within that environment. So for us, it's quite a compelling offering, the Tinkle for Teams solution for that part of the market, John. And we're seeing actually over the last few years since COVID that the progression of features and functions within the contact center within Teams enables it to be a realistically replacement for now some of the more progressive or developed or so-called gold standard contact centers in the market.
So I think in summary, it sounds like it's fair to say you started off in the unified comms world, you moved into that sort of Teams world because customers asked you for it. And then you didn't step into contact center, you almost fell into it because customers were saying, well, that's great that you're going to give us Teams and telephony. We also need contact center to work in this environment. So you kind of fell into that ecosystem, not necessarily out of choice, but was a good fit in the end. Anyway.
Yeah, well, 100%. I couldn't agree. But I think like you follow the trends, you follow the customer requirements, and because we don't have, because we're a service provider and we have a network that we could layer these services onto, it was more strategic around the customer requirements within that market, and typically the enablement of contact center within Teams at the time and even now, there's very few options around how that can work, but it's here and it makes sense, John. So we've actually hit a real sweet spot where I think we're able to provide these absolutely, mid-enterprise businesses with a solution at a price point and at a technical delivery point that makes sense and is value to their business. A simplification of the architecture, skill sets to manage it, presence. There's always the things with even my own CX platform, right? Connecting it into Teams, there's always an additional license cost. It doesn't ever, there's not saying it doesn't work because it does work, but there's always an extra pop, isn't there, John? In terms of how it can work. So having a native platform is a real selling point for these businesses because it simplifies it all.
That's a perfect segue, I suppose. But if I was to ask you, let's say a customer is starting from scratch with an old system, why does it matter whether you go native or you just kind of integrate with Teams as opposed to integrate into Teams, if that makes sense?
I think that to answer your question directly, it's simplification, it's cost optimization, it's an architecture that is comfortable for your team to manage and run. People are spending huge amounts of Microsoft licensing in Teams Admin Center, and that skill set of that team are more appropriately associated with Microsoft than they are a proprietary vendor. Getting trained up in the old days of VIA or so. There's lots of reasons: resourcing, simplification. I think reliability and stability of working within that ecosystem of Microsoft. Connecting third-party vendors no matter what the software changes. Microsoft recently changed how they want to allow businesses to get or circumvent buying an add-on license, and that was maybe 12 months ago. They stopped a way for the workarounds. So, if you're a customer and you've been getting it for free, this kind of presence integration, all of a sudden, Microsoft changed the goalposts and you're open to having to, not miss out on that functionality,
You make a very good case and a very compelling case for kind of moving to Microsoft Teams and for moving to a contact center within Teams. Obviously, reality is not every single customer says, great, I'm just going to go fully into the Microsoft ecosystem and I'm just going to buy everything in that ecosystem. So it'd be useful to know, what objections do you hear? As I said, you make a really compelling case, but I'm sure you still see objections to moving into that ecosystem, Microsoft Telephony and Contact Centre. And how do you work through those with the customer?
Yeah, so I think, to be really transparent, the fork in the road and the decision tree to come to Microsoft Teams into that platform environment is around budget. Yeah, so is buying the additional phone system license, does it cost in over, a proprietary all-inclusive feature bundle from Tinkle or from any, proprietary CX vendor, including the contact center? A strategy. I think some businesses, have Microsoft, but they have a number of other vendors. It's not the core vendor; it's the suite of O365. But for all the reasons why people can buy it, there are all the reasons why most probably it's not a good fit. But what I would say is certainly across the board that we deal with nationally and now sort of within Europe, service providers, it's really around that size and the of business, and budget of that business and what the telephony features need to provide. As a broad stroke, it's budget, it's strategy around Microsoft. It's, how important is presence as well, so, and the consumption of presence. Not every business has every user which is required to have presence. There's certain sectors, where it's like retail manufacturing, where a lot of the devices and endpoints aren't really, managed through Microsoft Teams, right? It's hotels, there's lots of things where potentially the vertical or the size would dictate if Teams is a good solution for that business. That being said, I think the broad stroke is size of business, optimization and strategy around Microsoft skill set, and security. I do think, the security one's not to be underplayed, that, you can have that through Microsoft, and also compliance around another, but that comes, those challenges, John, come with bigger businesses, don't they?
Of course.
And, a vast majority of our customers in the UK, which are SME, which is the lifeblood of our economy, they're really happy to have, presence on Teams for free and, have CX running their operations, and they get a great deal of value out of it. But yeah, again, that's budget and requirement, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think to add with the contact center piece that I see quite a lot, and I'm sure you guys see it as well with customers, is they want to make that jump to Microsoft. They want to make that decision, but there's always that overhanging. But we have a very, very important contact center at the moment. We need to make sure there is a contact center that fits into that ecosystem before we make that leap into the Microsoft environment. So knowing that they can come to the likes of you guys to say, can we get a Teams telephony solution, but also can we have a contact center, even if it's in a year's time, 6 months time, somewhere down the line, we're not going to be hooked into a dead end or kind of we're going to be locked into an ecosystem that can't give us contact center.
I completely agree with that. I think not just audio codes, etc., but generically, I think just awareness that you can have an enterprise contact center within Teams, but where that can be modular with the approach. So conversational IVR, start off with some better routing, get some statistics around that estate, automate at the inbound level, and then the reporting suite features and functions can be delivered cost effectively through some of the options in the market, obviously, that we work with to provide.
Yeah, and you very nicely have segued into pretty much my final question by just touching on it. If there's someone listening that wants to sanity check whether their current setup still makes sense, what's the first thing you'd have them look at Tinkle in terms of going into that customer? What are they going to have to look at internally? What are they going to have to compare? What decisions are they going to have to make?
Take a step up. What strategically is your strategy? Is it Microsoft led? Is your investment going to be consolidation of suites of services to go to E5? And then when you start talking about the contact center and how that works, I think, again, that's looking at how can we connect back office and front of house and contact center together on a single fabric and be able to lay presence between them, which has always kind of been a generic challenge when you have a really Rolls-Royce contact center that doesn't really connect to the people who might work within the business. And typically what we see within this investigation is, how can we provide a fabric that enables everybody to communicate together and be reported on in the most cost-effective way with a single presence fabric? And I think if we build it up from there, the strategy, the presence element, then the contact center piece is, look, voice, right? You've been doing it years, I do it. There's only many things you can do with the voice call, right? But I think in the modern age now, it's looking at those conversational IVR flows to start with, and the optimization and automation from lookups at that level. Yeah. And then going into the standard, reporting and call flows and skill base and all that sort of stuff. So for us, it's taking a step forward. Where's the business? What's the strategy? What's the investment? What's the team scale? A lot of businesses now are looking to optimize resource, of course. There's lots going on in the global markets, which, are impacting us here in the UK and or, with what's going on with, cost of living and or human resource costs. So everybody's looking at optimizing time and efficiencies of agents. And with the emergence of, obviously, AI, I wish it's taken us, 15, 20 minutes to even mention it.
Yeah.
But which is good, actually. But yeah, which is good.
I was actually going to say we haven't actually mentioned AI in the last 20 minutes, but quite refreshing to hear that your summary and what you see in the market is more around what are customers doing day to day, what are their agents doing, what platform do they need. None of these are kind of feature led, they're all kind of results led. Rather than going in with AI features and hitting everyone leading with AI, it's how do we do what you're doing today but slightly better? How do we take it, like you said, to that next level up without having to blast them with AI features constantly?
Yeah.
I suppose it's quite refreshing to hear a change in approach to that, which is great to hear.
Yeah, I think that's just from how we see the market and the tools that we provide. They're very use case specific, John. Obviously, we're building a business in the modern age as a modern service provider, and AI is a core part of our strategy. But we can only deliver what we see, and with our customers where they're up to. And
Yeah.
although everybody's talking about, the agent builders that we've got, and AudioCodes have got some great stuff there as well, but it's actually cut back to basics. What is it the customer wanted to do? And in most cases, it's simplifying infrastructure, costs, presence, security, and having a stable voice platform. And then after that, you can start looking at the use case specifics for improving elements of that with AI. Of course, AI is amazing, right? But it's just going to be around that use case.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. So yes, that pretty much wraps it up. So thank you very much, Sam, for sharing your expertise and your insight. And hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Cheers, John. Thank you so much, mate. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Always On CXCX. If you learned one thing from this episode, we'd appreciate if you'd subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. If you're using Microsoft Teams and are looking to integrate a contact center, consider trying Voca for free for 30 days. Voca is built on Microsoft Azure, meaning your customer interactions start, stay, and end with the same reliability and 5.9 uptime as Microsoft Teams. Just Google AudioCodes Voca or find the link in the show notes. Thank you again for tuning into this episode of Always On CXCX, and we'll see you in the next one.